Scream was a hi, like that. Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming, you know, especially since I came back and pretty much got, I guess you say, creative control of the band since 2019, because of petty threats and stuff from stuff. So it's like I finally said to I have a lawyer, and I said, you know, let's secure it. Let me get the name and everything. And I went through all the legal stuff to get the name and stuff, and that happened. And then of course there's still hiccups. You're trying to find the right people. And I decided at the time, I said, I've got to really get an album out. And I know people, you know, from all the other projects I did, and I was like, I can either try to search for band members or use people I know now that can do it. And I ended up doing that. But at the same time I did that, I said, I've got to find a live band. I've got to find somebody that can play live. So I started working with people that, you start off locally, you know, maybe people around your neighborhood or people in your vicinity, and that's what I started doing. And I pretty much have had Carlos, the guitar player, and Eldon, the drummer, now for 4 years. And they've been working as the live band for 4 years. And things have gone great, because since the Necrolution album that we just put out, they have now transitioned over to be the band. They're now solidly in the band. So that's a good, you know, good transition. It's also good because we worked together for 4 years, and they're still here, so. Well, I just felt like I was doing so many, and of course fans had a lot to do with it. People kept saying, well, we'd really like to see you back on stage, we'd really like to see you, I know you're doing this project, or they would ask a lot about the projects, like Bolnar, are you ever going to tour with Bolnar, or the Grotesquerie, I would love to see the Grotesquerie. And a lot of questions were coming from that, and I said, I guess people really want to see me perform. And I said, well, maybe I'll try a couple different projects at first. So I tried a couple different, you know, solo projects, and I was in a punk band for a while, and I got the feeling, you know, of being on stage in front of an audience again. And then people said, you just do this so good, you should just try to get Massacre back together. So it was a, you know, struggle, a little tug of war, legally and stuff, trying to get it. But finally, when I got it, I just went straight forward, and it's been pretty much strong ever since. I mean, not only on the live side, but also I've been, I think, the most prolific death metal band right now in the world, because I'm putting out stuff constantly. Yeah. No, I never actually thought about it. And I kind of think that's why it never really got resolved for almost, you know, 38 years. It was just kind of like most bands, you know. I know there's some bands that have come and they have legal problems, and then some guy runs off, you know, well, Pungent Stench for one, or Nocturnus for another, where one member owns the name. And I just never thought that, in your younger, you don't think that that's a thing, that you should own the name, or it should. But then you have this talk, usually by your father or somebody older, that says, you know, it's a business and you should really run it like a business, and a business is a brand, and you should, you know, really think about that. So once I thought about that, and I got my lawyer and everything, having talks with him and suggestions and everything, was like, yeah, this is how you should do it, and this is the legal way to do it. And it makes you grow up. It makes you go from being that kid, you know, with the dreams and aspirations of doing music, to being, okay, now I have to be an adult, I have to be a man, I have to run this like a business. And it's a really another completely different world. But you can still have that enthusiasm that you had as a youth, and I still try to bring that to the stage now, even almost going on 60 years old. Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just be cautious of your everything. I hate to say, be that like cynical guy that says don't trust anybody, but just be a little bit more cautious. You know, somebody you may think is trustworthy may have other ulterior motives. They may have a different agenda than you, even though they're going along with you, and the band seems to be working along. There may be, just be aware that not everybody's on this, they're going in the same direction, but they're all not always on the same boat. You know, they're all traveling the same river, but they might not all be on the same boat. And that's what I would say for younger people to watch out for, because I don't want to say something and then a young person becomes a complete narcissist and becomes like overbearing, because there's some bands out there that have those kind of members too, that have the guy that wants to control everything and I'm not going to name names, but there are bands out there that are like that, and I know those bands, and that can be also a problem as well. It's a lot of shit, you know. And I think that's always a cautionary tale that you gotta if you're if you're the creator and you're the main creator, make sure that no one's going to basically steal that creativity from you, and be guarded with your creativity. I wish I was a little bit more guarded with my creativity. I wish I would have. And the thing was, when you're young and you're impressionable, a lot of us we don't have maybe the self-esteem that you get when you get older. So a lot of us rely on our friends, thinking our friends are the ones that are going to help us get there, and then you find out later that your friends are like, bye, and you're on a cliff's edge. I'm gone, leaving, but you're hanging there like this, one arm up, But yeah, so there were those times that I saw stuff happening, and I'm like, yeah, well, I created that logo, and now it's one of the most known logos in the world. I wrote those songs, and I was part of that, and people, and I, still to this day, but there are those small groups of fans that know the truth, and they're the ones that always come to me and go, we know. The world may not know, but we know. And that's what makes me feel good. When somebody comes in and they give me that acknowledgement. They say, yeah, the world may know this, Google may say this, the internet may say that, but we know the truth. We were there with you the whole time, so we know the real truth. And that's what helps me. Well, I've never wanted to be that rock star. I don't like that terminology. I don't like to see, we're death metal, and I don't like to see death metal become this, and it's two good things. There's a positive and negative. The positive thing is, if you would have asked me 40 years ago, would death metal still exist? I would have said, no way. Because I literally thought we were just doing noisy music just for the fun of it, writing about horror and gore and stuff, and it was just going to be, something forgotten. But here it is now, 40 years later, and it is the staple of metal music today. You can't listen to any modern metal without the roots going back to death metal. There's always the growling singing, the aggressive singing, the thrash beats, the blast beats, everything, the double bass, it all comes back to death metal. And I know people say black metal, but yeah, black metal had its thing, but it was like, they weren't so separate at the time. They were like kind of hand in hand. Then they separated when the symphonic black metal came out, but death metal kind of like but it's found its way back, and that's what is exciting to me. It's found its way back. But like I said, 40 years ago, if you would have asked me, would it still be here today, I would have said no way. But now seeing where it's at, it's kind of nice. It's kind of a cool thing to see. And especially an old man like me. Yeah, we're all human. I mean, there's those guys that put up the fronts and act like tough guys and stuff like that. But we're all human. We all have. Hopefully, we all have those emotions. A lot of them are narcissists, so they don't really have that empathy. But a lot of it, I would like to think that most of us have sort of empathy. We have that. We have self-doubt, and I think a lot of musicians, I actually can say from 40 years in the business, a lot of musicians suffer from self-esteem. I mean, we want to be recognized for our art. We want to be praised for our art. Not necessarily like me, I'm not looking for praise as I am looking for appreciation. And there's a difference, you look people that look for praise, they will create and do stuff whatever is popular. And then there's people that want to do what they do with their artistic talents, and they want to be appreciated for it. Not necessarily get famous or rich or everything like that. They just want to be known for, hey, that guy did this, and that is really great. I think so. It's has, ironically, you're holding it right there, it's had a resurgence. And that's why I came up with the title for that, because it's in this sort of resurgence sort of thing. And yeah, there was a time I fell out, and I fell out in 93, 94, when, of course, the band just flip-flopped. And I don't want to talk about former members, but I can talk about this album. Horrible Promise album was done, And I was in the studio and they were recording this, and I was just like, this is horrible. This is terrible. This is god awful. I'm like, I hate this album. And I just like, I went in there and I said, this is not death metal. This is not death metal. And I quit. I left. I quit the band. And it was so horrible. I was out of the scene for 10 years, a decade. That's how horrible I felt. I said, this is crap. And I left. And I was like, if this is what death metal's turning into, I'm out. I'm out of here. But 10 years later, I came back, and I came back with my band Denial Fiend, and then I just jumped in from that to doing all these projects, working with Roger Johansson and doing Bolnar and Johnny Pedersen, and working with so many different great people on so many projects. And it became sort of fun to just do music because we were doing music, not doing music because we were rock stars. We were just doing music that we liked, and it didn't matter if a bunch of people liked it. We liked it, and that's what was important, and that's what I did with all the projects I started with, because it was stuff. I made music, Broken Gravestones, Grave Wax, The Grotesquerie, Bonar, Acatharda. These were all projects I did because this is stuff I wanted to listen to. This is the kind of music I wanted to hear, so that's what we did. Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's great, and I'm real easy. I've never charged anybody. Well, people were very surprised. Actually, I'll sometimes, like if I like a band, like a Human Compost or something, or Dehydration, and I heard them, and I heard their music, and then like Dehydration, I knew they did a Massacre cover, and I contacted them. I said, yeah, this is really good, but I like your other stuff too. I said, would you ever want me to do some backing vocals? And they're like, what? Really? How much would you charge? I'm like, nothing. They're like, what? And then I blow their minds. And it's like, yeah, I love to do this stuff, because when I was younger, if I would have had somebody, one of my heroes, like, you know, Tom G. Warrior would have come to me and said, would you like me to do some backing vocals or something? That would have blown my mind. It would have been the greatest honor. So I want to give to those younger bands that which I never got, that I wished for. So I do that, and I don't charge. I'm like, nah, it's fun. It's fun. Why would I charge for something fun? Yeah, I try to preserve the old school style of death metal. That's my biggest thing. Is I'm not ashamed to say old. You know, when they say old school death metal now, but when I was doing it, it wasn't old school. It was just death metal, because we have to put that separation, because there's so many subgenres now. There's so many things where it's kind of escalated. We've gotten to where bands are really technical, like you have Necrophagists and stuff like this, and you know, Nile and all these bands that are super technical, which is really great, and I like that stuff. But I've always liked the groove of the original death metal. It's a sort of Mortician usually says this, and it's one of the things I love about Mortician is they always consider their riffs to be caveman riffs. I love that term, caveman riffs. It makes it very primitive and primal. And sometimes that's what I adhere to. Something simple but catchy, but still can be brutal at points, but not overly brutal. And I noticed that I'm not trying to say anything bad about these more technical bands. They're great for what they do. But I noticed a lot of the more technical bands, they're bands for musicians. Musicians like those bands because they appreciate it. They're like, oh, you know, Dying Fetus is so awesome, like everything they do. And yes, I love Dying Fetus, but it's more of a musician's band. Like, I noticed my guitar player loves them because he's a guitar player. Your common person, they're like, oh, it just sounds, I can't tell the difference between one song to the next. You can put on Dying Fetus Suffocation and they can't tell the difference. I like things when you put on something and you can hum the groove. You hum the riff when you go home. You're like, why am I humming this song? I heard it, you know, 3 days ago, but it's still sticking with me. So I like that primitive sort of style about the old school death metal. That's why I still do it. I still try to bring that spirit into it. I think so. Yeah. It has those steps. It's just kind of weird because I know that I wanted Resurgence to be sort of like what would have Massacre after From Beyond go to. And everyone, you know, of course you have people nitpick things, say, oh, you know, it doesn't have this certain sound of this certain member and certain stuff like that. And of course it doesn't, you know, because it's different people. But I still try to bring the spirit. The roots are there. And I wanted the roots and the core to be there. And then with Necrolution, I wanted to go back to even more, you know, something that was kind of like the end of the 80s era type of like early, but have that little Morbid Angel mix in it, kind of like a little bit like that stuff, and that Florida death metal with also a little bit of a Swedish death metal from the late 80s, like Nihilist and stuff like that. I really like honed in on the demo times, like the demo and the tape trading era. That was like my big for me. Like in the 90s, I did my own fanzine where I got, you know, tape traded, and I started off as a tape trader. So remember the feeling of the demo days. I remember getting the demo tape. You didn't know what it was. You couldn't go on the internet. You had no internet. You just get the demo tape. You look at the cover. Okay, well, it's going to be brutal. And you just put it in and you just wait. And this tape would start and you're like blown away because you're listening to it for the first time. There was no one else telling you you should listen to this. You're listening to it. You're choosing yourself if you like it. Sometimes there was shit like, oh, pop it out. Next. Sometimes there was stuff you just listened to the whole thing and you were just absorbed by it. And that's what I was trying to bring back with Necrolution. No. After Necrolution, Necrolution was going to be the last. It was planned to be the last for the studio lineup. Actually, after Resurgence, we did Resurgence and Mythos, kind of like those songs were written at the same time. And then both Roga Johansson and Johnny Pedersen both said, wow, we had really fun doing this. Could we do some more? And they did. Right after Resurgence, they got me another album, and I felt it was too similar. Like it was like the songs just sounded like, oh, you're just rehashing the same thing. I said, I don't want to be like some other bands that are from Florida that do the same album 400 times. But I said, let's try to do it again. So Johnny said, well, what do you like about this? What's the songs you like? I said, let me pick out the best songs. Those actual songs ended up becoming the Tripocalypse EP. They were the best songs from that recording session. Then I went in and I told both Roga and Johnny, I said, I want to go back to the late 80s, to the demo era. And they were like, oh, well, that's our favorite stuff. I said, yeah, just write me stuff that sounds like that. I didn't realize when I told them that literally I opened the floodgates, because I thought I would get 8, 10 songs. They sent me 17 songs. And then I was like, should I record them all? Okay, let's do it. Because I really, how I thought was, maybe we'll just put one part of it out and then another part. Then when I got on with Philip, with Agonia, he's like, no, you should put out the whole thing. And I'm like, really? That's a lot. That's 17 songs. So we thought about it, we talked about it, we trimmed it down, put the intros in, and I said, there's going to be 22 songs if we do this. I said, we're going to have to trim it back. So we trimmed it back. I took some of the songs off of it, and I saved those for EPs, because I love to put out singles and releases and EPs. I love to do that, because it reminds me of the old days. It reminds me of the demo days. So we did it, and Necrolution came out, and it still has a lot of songs. It's still got 16 songs, I think. And then so that's how it happened. And then once that happened, they realized, and especially because Mike Borders was going to hit his health. You know, he decided he was going to step down. He couldn't tour anymore, and he has health problems. So it was best that he stepped down. He stepped down amicably. We still have no problems with each other and still talk. And I knew I was going to be using Eldon, who's the drummer now, and I was going to use Carlos. And we just needed to find a bass player. And first we used Tony from Eldon's other band, Druid Lord. And then I felt that Tony would better suited to stick with Druid Lord. And then we got Tim in now. So Tim came in. But this is the lineup now, because this lineup has already written new stuff. So this will be the lineup moving forward. I don't know how much longer I got, because I'm almost 60, so hopefully I can keep going. Maybe another 5 years, who knows. Am I going to be doing death metal at 65? I don't know, maybe I'll come out with a walker. I don't know. We'll see. He's a machine. Yeah. He's a riff machine. They call him the riff machine. I know some people get mad and they make fun of him because he doesn't really go out and tour. But why does that make a band? Why does a band have to tour? To me, it's like you're a musician, you're making music. I mean, only in, I guess, the rock genre is it looked that lightweight. You have other types of music where there's composers and musicians that don't even leave their house, like Roga, and they're famous. But only, we put this, what's the word I'm trying to look for? stigma, I guess, on rock musicians that, oh, they have to be the same musicians from the time they were created to the time they're, and yet I don't know any band that's still, I mean, Macabre. They've been the only band I know that have the same members. Napalm Death aren't even in the same lineup. You know, there's so many different people that have changing lineups all the time. So I never understood why there's this sort of, you know, staple stigma on, oh, you can't be a real musician unless you tour. That's not true. I mean, there's many real musicians that stay home. And we're lucky that we live in a time period that technology has allowed us this type of stuff, where these people who might not necessarily want to go out but have this creative, you know, ability to be able to actually do something, because in the 80s you couldn't. There was probably geniuses around the world who were never heard of because they didn't have the ability to do what they do now. So I don't knock it. I think it's great that we have this ability. And yes, it was real easy to work with Roga, because when Roga and I started back in 2007, that's how far we go back, it was file sharing. And we were just like, okay, let me send you a file. And he sent me a file, and it was just a riff with a click track, click, 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 click. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And that's how we started. So we got a really good working kind of thing. He would send me a riff. He'd send me, you know, riffs together. I'd tell him, okay, this one's good. That one's shit. Let's get rid of that one. Start over. Come up with something better. And we worked really well at that, and very fast, very fluent in doing that, because not only were we just doing it on the internet with emails, once Skype came up, I was calling him, hey, I'm looking at him on the, hey, that's a great riff and we take the time signature, from 0 to 138, awesome. 138 to 142, shit, get rid of that. You know. I don't know. I mean, I guess to some people it might have. You know, I mean, you're always going to have that split fan base that always thinks like, you know, this should be this way or that should be that way. I mean, I still see today people are confused. People think that Massacre came after Death Leprosy, when it's actually, the truth was Massacre was around before that. You know, we were around in 85, 86, and 87. Those guys jump shipped when Chuck moved back to Florida and just said, you know what, we're just going to take everybody but leave KAM. Because, you know, Chuck was like, well, I don't want to work with him anymore. You know, he insulted me. So they jumped ship and went to do Leprosy. But then when From Beyond came out, it was after those guys, you know, were in Leprosy and Spiritual Healing, and then they come back, you know, kind of like at the last minute, and we put out the album in '91. I mean, so many years later now, it shouldn't matter. But the history is very convoluted. Massacre has one of the most convoluted histories ever. I mean, people forget that Alan West, who was known for Obituary, was actually in Massacre. You know, there's so many different members that have been a part of this band. And this band has sort of been that band that's kind of like people come in and leave, you know, and come in and leave. And it's always been that way. But then again, there's a lot, like I said before, there's a lot of bands that have different members. You know, there's one band that might be a key member. Okay, yeah. The recent period. I don't know. I mean, I never thought of it in that way. I never thought of it in that sort of, you know, mindset, to think of it in any way. I mean, I just thought of it as like, these are the people I know, and the people I know that write the way that I like, write music that I like, and you know, so I used Roga, I used Johnny. We had Scott from Memoriam come in and do the solos on Resurgence, and I think he did some excellent solos, especially the solos on the Mythos. He did some solos there. So it was good. And I also have, like, you know, when I do my singles, I like to have people, I reach out to people that I've known, and I like to say, hey, would you want to come do, like, I've had David Ingram from Benediction come and do stuff, and other you know, musicians. But I also like to use unknown musicians. Like, we had Frey Mancini, who, she was in a band, Necrocy, and I said, would you come do a lead? She was really like, what? I'm like, yeah, just come do a solo on the new album. So she did the solo on The Color Out of Space, which is an amazing solo, you know. So I like to take people that are not only well-known, but I like to take people that are up and coming and try to kind of give them exposure. Because that's what this used to be about. It never used to be about, it's all about me and fuck off everybody else, and I'm the, I'm the king of death metal, Satan and fucking Papa Satan and all this. I'm gonna put a cross on my fucking forehead and all, shit, stupid. But it used to be about kind of like a community. And that's what I remember. I'm going back to the 80s when it was a community. It was tape trading. Everybody helped everybody. Everybody would say, hey man, have you heard of the new Nihilist? No, who is that? Oh, check out this band from Sweden. Fucking love them. Or this is a great band called Pungent Stench. Pungent Stench? What the fuck is that? Yeah, check them out. They're great. Yeah, there was those days, man. And I loved those days. Yeah. The drummer moved to Japan, but I never was in Japan. No, I was always in Florida. I mean, originally, when I was a little baby, I was born in Hawaii. That's where I'm from. I'm Hawaiian, so. But then I moved to Florida. I used to live in South Florida, grew up in South Florida, was a little punk rock kid at first, and then I discovered this death metal stuff. Well, I guess you could say we created it, because, I mean, we did Mantis, and it's like, that's kind of like how it all started, I mean, the only bands that I knew back then were, there was us, Possessed. I'm not gonna. I love Jeff, and I will always say Jeff has. And there was Paul Speckman from Death Strike, and Tom G was doing Hellhammer, and Bathory, and that was about it. Besides Venom, that was maybe 4 or 5 bands that you could count on one hand, and it just kind of spread out from there. Yes, there was German thrash. There was Sodom and Destruction and Creator, who were called Tormentor first. And stuff like that. And there was, of course, Sarcophago and stuff like that from South America. But that was it. And then it just sort of just blew up after that. It just exploded, especially during the tape trading times. Because we just would go in and recorded practice, rehearsal, and we call them a demo. And all it was we were just practicing, recording on a boom box sitting on the floor, and we just put it out. And there's so many versions out because I was tape trading and Chuck was tape trading. But both of us were just putting stuff out constantly. Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of still in the same way because Carlos always says it all the time, even when he's writing, he goes, I will write albums, but I always work with KAM. So everybody sort of kind of looks to me to kind of like, not that I'm the tyrant or like I'm trying to be like the guy that says everything, but they'll bring stuff to me just to see if it fits. And sometimes, like I said before, with even Roga and other people, death metal has to have that certain feeling. And it's kind of weird, but talking as a musician, if you start to write in major scales, it starts to sound too happy. And that might work for some bands, but to me, like I said before, I like those primitive caveman riffs. So everything has to be minors. Everything has to sound spooky or eerie or creepy and have this sort of evilness to it. So Carlos is always like, I'm going to bring you something, but I'm going to make sure you like it, so it's always a collective thing. They always write stuff, and I'm very open for everybody to write, and then, they bring it by me and see if it's good, and then we'll sit down and we'll chew at it and go, okay, that's great, that's awesome, maybe we could do this a little differently. So we work, that's how I worked with Roga, and that's how I work with Johnny, and that's how I work now with Carlos. So it's always a collective thing.
Perfect.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, that's really good.
Okay, could you give us your best scream in front of the camera?
Best scream or growl? Because I can do either.
Like you want.
Okay, so the scream was hi! Like that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.